Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Relationship Mastery Series. Principles to a Passionate Life in Relationships and Dynamite Families. I'm Alan Darbonne, and I'll be your host for this series. And I've collected 25 wonderful experts, heart-driven experts, that have a lot of experience in the field of relationships at different levels. And they're going to share with you that experience and give you some tips that is boots on the ground information that will help you both to find that relationship and to be able to sustain it once you find it. And like we all break relationships from time to time. It's a human nature and part of our growth. And how to repair that when that does happen so we can get the heart juices flowing again as soon as possible. And today I'm very excited because I have on the show with me Lillian Ruby. And Lillian is operating and talking to us today from Newmarket, Ontario in Canada. And she's a psychotherapist, a life coach, a relationship healer, and a teacher. She teaches people to know their gifts, to love themselves, and to own their power, and to manifest their dream life. She has a compassionate, balanced approach to her work, and she implies intuition, education, and experience to all of her work. She sees opportunity in meeting struggles head-on, so clients can learn from them and enjoy the benefits of wisdom and self-mastery that come out of that. So Lillian integrates a number of things, many different disciplines. She's obviously put a great deal of time into learning many methods and disciplines through the years, and she integrates those in her offerings to individuals and to couples. So first off, I want to mention one thing before I forget it. At the end of the interview, Lillian actually is going to offer you a free gift. So stay tuned to the very last minute because she'll tell you about that free gift, and I'll also tell you exactly how to get to the link that will give you access to that link. But again, Lillian, welcome. I really appreciate you being on the show and looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you for inviting me, Alan.
It's my pleasure.
And I just wanted to correct my last name. It's Benrubi.
Benrubi. Oh,
yeah.
Well, I thought that's what I said, but
you said Lillian Ruby, but that's okay.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
Sure.
So first off, I'd love to have you share with me and with our audience how you actually got into this whole relationship field.
Got it. Okay. Well, I think that, our relationship to ourselves, first of all, has been, something that's been very, very important to me. And that's where I really started off. So it was really, my baby was working with child abuse and neglect. And what I witnessed there was that the parents of a lot of children who were abused or neglected, or, the parents of the children who were abusing, I just felt that there was a lot of room for them to start working on their relationship to themselves in order to be able to provide the kind of parenting that children need in order to thrive in life, right? So it started off with that, and then I just ended up starting to work with people who really just wanted to feel better about themselves, wanted to be able to look at themselves in the mirror and feel very proud, or feel, like they didn't need to hide anything from the world. They wanted to feel at peace from the inner chatter in their heads. And they wanted to be able to let go of the past and put it back in the past instead of having it constantly show up in their future. Right? So I started working on relationship to yourself, and then I wasn't looking for it, but all of a sudden couples started seeking me out. And I kind of landed on this, working with couples, and just found that I everything that I had been doing applied to working in relationship to one another, right? And I just love working with couples. there's so much rich information to work with. I think that when couples really love one another, and I think naturally as individuals, we really want to grow and evolve and to be able to see ourselves as powerful beings who can get over issues that we're dealing with.
Right, right. And I really can appreciate your background back when you started off with abuse,
Child abuse.
And that aspect, because that tapping into the recognition of the impact of abuse when it's in the extreme, which is the work you were doing originally, but it alerts us all to how much even minor abuses and
yes.
what can constitute a sense of abuse or threat. And
yes.
so I really appreciate you have that in your background.
Thank you. Thank you.
So there's you mentioned on your website about focusing on struggle and self-mastery. I'd love if you could say a little bit about that, because
For
that
sure.
really is right on.
For sure. I mean, the thing that comes to me is a saying that my father used to say to me when I was a child, and that is that without suffering, there is no growth, there's no spirituality. Maybe it's biblical. I'm not sure where he got that from exactly, but it rang true for me at a very young age. And, and I think, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Tversky, but he has a few videos on YouTube, and he talks about the fact that we do need to get really uncomfortable in order for us to want to create change and to be able to evolve. But it's a natural human evolution. It's just we change, right? Our needs change. We grow. We want more. We want less sometimes, Our lives become more simple perhaps, or we wish for more simplicity as we get older. And of course, the more we are flexible and able to adjust to those changes, specifically without a lot of judgment around it, which is hard for us, right? The easier it is for us to be able to flow into those changes. However, as human beings, we're not gravitated towards being uncomfortable, right? We're not gravitated towards change. We're not drawn towards it intuitively. So things do have to get uncomfortable. Sometimes we do have to struggle in order to notice that it's time for change, right?
Right.
And then the self-mastery piece is really just about being able to achieve a certain level of, mastery over our thoughts, over our emotions, our state at any given moment. So, for example, this morning, I kind of woke up irritable this morning. And, I had to ask myself, if I had a choice, what energy or what do I, what energy do I want to focus on, or what thoughts do I want to focus on today, right? And when we are able to ask ourselves that question and choose, then we have mastery over our experience of the day, over our relationships, over interactions, over our work, and so on and so forth. So my job is to help people learn themselves how to create some self-mastery in that respect.
Yeah, and I like that you indicated the first step is first recognizing that.
Absolutely.
That's a big thing in and of itself, just
yes.
Reaching that self-awareness. And
yeah, and I think what's helpful with that is really just to start. It's no different than if you were to, I don't know, work on something more practical, let's say an eating plan. Let's say you were going to be cutting out wheat. So all of a sudden you're going to start noticing, wheat in whatever foods you eat. If you're going to be looking for a particular car, you're going to be noticing that particular car that that's the awareness. So you make it your objective to be aware of what state you are in the morning, let's say, or you start in the morning and midday, and you can put reminders, even in your phone, or your alarm clock or whatever, to just bring you back to your awareness, your alertness around asking yourself that question: how am I feeling today? Or how am I feeling in this moment? Right.
Yeah, exactly. Now I know that you've done a good deal of work, and you have interest in terms of blended family work.
Yes.
And I'd love you to talk about that, because this day and age, that's a very important thing. And there really isn't enough talk about that.
Yeah.
So if you could tell me a little bit about what you've noticed there and
Sure, sure.
along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it depends. I mean, there's so many variables that come into play, right, that create each blended family's unique struggles or issues. You know, one particular family that I'm working with currently, there are two children on both sides, very similar in age, beginning of the teenage years. So again, it really depends on what stage of development children are at the same time as well. As you know, where the parents are in terms of their evolution individually and how connected they are as a couple. Right? So, you know, I think it would make sense to say that the more connected that couple is, the easier it is for those adults, for the caregivers, the mentors, to be able to direct the children around whatever struggles they're having. There's a lot of adjustments that are occurring when we're blending a family, and it really requires an openness to having discussions, right? But also some leadership from the parents around boundaries, what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable, being able to express yourself openly, being responded to, your needs being responded to, you know, perhaps orchestrating family discussions at times when that is necessary, and just, you know, giving each other permission to be able to be with whatever it is that you're feeling. Instead of sometimes what happens is, you know, parents will coach children, well, you shouldn't feel that way, or you don't need to feel that way. You could feel this way, or you could, you know, do it this way, that kind of thing. But just giving children and, you know, any members of the family permission to be where they're at, so that we can speak frankly, openly, with respect, of course. And that's where the boundaries come in and the mentoring comes in, so that, you know, things can have room to be resolved.
And along those lines, in terms of the connection, which,
yes,
it's so vital. I agree.
Yes.
What are some of the things that initially interrupt that connection, particularly in blended families?
Well, I mean, I think that you know, parents can be somewhat protective of their own children, right? They can feel defensive, you know, if there are any complaints about their children, either from the other children or the other parent. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember the question that you had asked. So you're asking about the connection.
Yeah, in terms of, I mean, first, what are some of the things that do come up that, because often when a couple starts out, they feel that connection.
Absolutely.
Particularly in situations that may be blended families or something else. But
yes,
case, what are some of the things that come up that then seem to interrupt that connection?
Yeah, and I think, you know, a lot of it has to do with, you know, any couple with, excuse me, whether they are blended or whether they're not. And that is the beginning stage of a relationship. We tend to pay a lot more attention to the relationship, right? And by paying attention, what I mean by that is we're actually giving our attention to the relationship. It becomes our focus because we're trying to develop this connection, right? We're trying to create more intimacy, safety, and security in a relationship, which is essential. It's incredibly important in relationships. And so, you know, we have this very sort of focused, directed attention to the relationship. When we blend and we, you know, come into a much sort of, well, not even that. When we create these many more relationships under one roof, now we're being pulled in so many different directions. And sometimes it feels as though we're in conflict, right? Between the needs of this person and the needs of that person, and we feel stuck in the middle, and we don't know how to negotiate those needs, right? And then there's my own needs, right? And where does that all come in? And how do we support one another instead of, you know, how do we create this as a win-win situation instead of a win-lose? Often we have conversations and discussions, you know, with the framework of win-lose, who's right, who's wrong, as opposed to, you know, my experience of this and your experience of this, you know, is, and then having those two experiences actually add to the whole picture so that we can see more of what's going on. Right?
Yeah, and that, I like what you said about win-win. I mean, that in itself, you audience, you can put a big star by that one. If you can, whatever you're approaching, if somewhere you can have a discussion within the family about that what we're all looking for is a win-win. We don't want anybody losing here.
No, no.
And if you can get that out so that you can kind of come back to that, because we all get kind of our own stuff starts to come in, and
Yes.
the sooner we can see that, the better, of course. But it helps if we know, oh, wait a minute, this has nothing to do with win-win.
Yes.
Let me get back to being on track.
Yes.
We're a team here, folks. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think as a couple, one of the things that is, that's very helpful when we're getting to a place, where we're having a discussion and we're feeling emotionally charged, is to have that awareness that we're getting emotionally charged and that this is perhaps the time to kind of take a time out from the conversation. Right? Because when we get emotionally charged, what ends up happening is we're just trying to reestablish our safety and security in this conversation or in this relationship. So we're not paying attention to the content of the conversation any longer, which is, the reason why this conversation came up and it is what we want to resolve.
Right.
So what ends up happening is, we keep getting, our emotional charge keeps escalating, right? But when we have the awareness of that sort of initial sort of sign that we're getting emotionally charged, that is a good time to take a time out from the conversation, right? Leave the content of that conversation to the side and now come to a conversation around, reestablishing that sense of safety and security in the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes an awful lot of sense. And that whole concept that for many people, it's a thought that never enters their mind, that you can actually say, let's take a time out on this. Let's make a commitment. We're going to come back to it. But we can actually, things are beginning to get to a place where we're not going toward win-win or solution.
No.
And so we both need something. Let's take care of that and then come back together.
Yes.
And aim at that. And
yes.
for many couples, they don't realize they can actually do that. They kind of get pulled
yes.
into an argument. It's like,
yes.
and the argument is leading them.
Absolutely.
What in the world were we arguing about?
Yeah, they're no longer in a place of power. They're no longer in a place of self-mastery, right?
Right.
It's the emotion, or sometimes it's the other person that's making me, right? And when we give that much power to any outside influence, then what we're essentially saying is that I don't have any power or control over what's going on here for me. So the whole training and therapy is really directed towards how do we gain self-mastery over what's going on here? Because what's going on here is mine. I own it. Nobody else can make me, right? Right. So it's, there's a bit of work that occurs around first the awareness and then changing or shifting our paradigm, around, what outside influences can make me and which ones can't. And I have a choice, right?
Right.
And I often will tell couples that, just in terms of, taking that time out and talking about reestablishing safety and security is really to start practicing on more neutral issues and not the bigger emotionally charged issues, right? So there's specific exercises that one can do, right, to do that. But you would choose a pretty neutral issue as opposed to anything that is a recurring, highly charged issue to start with.
Right.
Just to get the skills down pat, and then to start applying it to the stuff that has us just go, off, right?
Yeah. Now, you mentioned exercises. Could you share with our audience
Sure.
what one of those exercises might be?
Sure. So part of the, reestablishing safety, or at least, it can also be used to kind of prevent going off, in the conversation to some extent. And that's really to keep eye contact, right? Like just to keep having eye contact with the person, to not walk away from one another. And as soon as you walk away from each other, then that's the time to take time out. Because what you've done is actually broken the bond that prevents us from being able to go to a place where we hurt one another, right? Not necessarily intentionally, but, we may hurt one another by something we say or don't say, something we do or don't do, right? But then nonetheless, one of the things that you do is keep eye contact. And so you just have a conversation around something rather neutral. and just start to be aware of your eye contact, your ability to keep the eye contact, what's going on for you. You know, when you keep that eye contact, are you comfortable, uncomfortable? You know, is it scary? Is it, you know, does it feel like you're going to be consumed by that eye contact by that person? Or do you feel invited to go in? Do you feel more connected and closer? And so it's just noticing what's going on for you, right? So that you can, you know, you get some practice around that so that you can do it when it starts to get really difficult to keep the eye contact, when you actually want to break away, right?
Right.
So it's one of the things that you can do. The other thing, I'm just trying to think about, you know, everything that I kind of instruct couples to do. You know, the other thing also is just to hold hands while you're talking, for sure, right? And then, you know, I will also talk to couples about, so if one is in a distressed place, but the other one isn't, to just be able to touch somebody, to touch that person, the one who is distressed, on the shoulders, you know, or just hold them and have eye contact with them so that they know they are safe with you and secure with you. And that brings connection and intimacy again here, right? And to start noticing again for both parties what goes on for you when that happens, right? So some of us don't like to be touched when we are, you know, emotionally charged, right? Right. Yeah. And, you know, and some of us need it, you know, incredibly. The other person who is actually doing the touching may feel confronted by that person's emotional charge and feel that it's not safe to go down and touch them, right? So again, just trying that in more neutral. And I'm not saying neutral like talking about, you know, the color of your cupboards or something like that. I'm talking about an issue that you have, but nothing that really takes you to that place where you go off, right? So just choosing a topic, like perhaps, I don't know, it really all depends. I was going to say, you know, choosing the color of the walls that you're going to paint, but sometimes that becomes a huge issue for couples too. So you have to choose essentially what is more neutral for you. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. But just to try.
A toothpaste cap has a very
yes.
different to one couple that has two.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. You were mentioning about eye contact, and that's so important because, I mean, the brain research now is so strong that when we don't have eye contact, we also are generally not looking at all. And there are two sides of that. I mean, one thing is we're missing actually the connectability through the eyes, but the other side is that we're missing some cues. Sometimes our partner has kind of softened for a moment. But if you're not looking at them, you don't even see that.
Yes.
They're ready to soften and it's a time for a shift.
Yes.
You haven't even seen it. And
absolutely.
Continue the battle and they say, well, there's no use getting soft with this person.
Yes. Yes. So true. And I think that that's the trouble that a lot of couples run into when they're texting one another, right?
That's very, very difficult.
Yes. There's so much information that is not coming in.
These texting battles go on forever.
Yes. Yes.
That's it. You're missing touch. You're missing eye contact. You're missing the sound so much that human beings need to communicate. In fact, early on in our lives, if we don't get that, we don't thrive, you know, so.
Yes, and sometimes it's difficult to even be able to read those cues if we haven't had that kind of parenting or that kind of training in our childhood.
Another good point,
Yeah, which is something that we need to train ourselves. But I mean, all of it is doable. All of it is really doable. We have natural instincts. So we just need to access them if we haven't used them, right?
Yeah, that's the good news, folks, is that no matter how bad you think it is, it actually 99% of the time can be reversed toward that win-win, toward that healing.
Yes.
You and I have been in this business long enough to have seen that so many times. At times when I thought, well, there's no way. And that couple somehow, the love was deep enough, and with some support, they did it, and they ended up creating what they've been dreaming and were about to leave the relationship about.
Absolutely. And some renew their vows.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I'm curious in terms of your own practice and experience and what you're seeing nowadays. What would you say is like the number one problem you see coming up like most frequently as a problem in relationships?
Oh, big question.
Mhm.
I would really say that a lot of it has to do with, well, there's two of them. Can I say two of them?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. I'm having trouble choosing between the two. One of them is simply what we talked about, and that is doing the things that we need to do in order to connect. So going to a place of vulnerability, right? That is probably one of the most difficult things that I'm witnessing couples couples are having, is just going to a place of vulnerability. And everybody has their threshold around vulnerability, right? So for some couples, vulnerability might be, 60%, others might be 80%, but not, further, and so on and so forth. For the lack of a better measuring tool, just using the percentages. So everybody has their threshold of vulnerability, but vulnerability is access to intimacy. Intimacy is connection, right? And, connection is everything in relationships. It's what has us feel loved, safe, secure, and allows us to thrive, right? In relationships and in our lives as well.
Right.
We are wired to be in relationship. We can't fight that wiring. So the vulnerability piece certainly is something that I see as a regular issue. And I'm trying to grasp the other one, but I can't remember what I was thinking at this point. So let's go with the vulnerability one. It's definitely a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean,
yes.
My last appointment yesterday was all around that.
Yes.
And it was so clear that what needed to happen was some vulnerability, but there was so much pain there over hurt.
Yes.
That was the focus. And so much so that you couldn't even be vulnerable about the pain. It was just the anger that was present.
Got it.
And so generally, I know in my life, it's the case, if I'm really angry and frustrated, if I look a little further, I'm in fear or pain, folks.
Always. They say anger is a secondary emotion most of the time anyways, right? There's always something underneath the anger. So for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about particularly children and families and empowerment, because I know this is something you pay attention to. And
for sure.
Would you say a little bit about your point of view around that?
Children, empowerment, and families. I think that children are most empowered when their parents are empowered. And I can tell you, what's that?
Yeah, I totally agree.
Agree with that. Yeah, no, for sure. So I can tell you from personal experience, having had parents for 30 years that were quite often at war, it was not an empowering place to be as a child, right? Every child has their own spirit, their own approach, their own thoughts and their own feelings, but certainly mine was to try and do as much as possible to help my parents with their issues, right? And that has a huge impact on a child growing up, right?
Yeah.
And then, as children, of course, we make up all kinds of stories and meanings and attach them to our experiences that aren't true, right? So certainly one of the, limiting beliefs, or one of the beliefs that I had, growing up, was that my love couldn't make a difference in my parents' relationship. I'm 8 years old, 10 years old when I make that decision, right? And an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old can't possibly see the whole picture to really come to an accurate decision or an accurate belief about the power of their own love or the power that they have within themselves. But having witnessed my parents not being in a place of power over their relationship and over their own lives and make themselves happy, right, had me believe that I too was powerless, because I'm taking in those experiences. I'm taking in those emotions. I'm taking in that energy, right? That sense of powerlessness, right? So really what we want to do as parents is not blame ourselves for anything, because we're learning. We may not have had the best modeling from our parents. We don't, certainly none of us have all of the modeling that could possibly happen, you know, growing up as children. We're developing, right? But if we're starting to see that we're not in a place of power in our lives, and really all that means, I mean, I know that that's a buzzword that's being used over and over again. It's becoming quite cliche. But really all that means is the ability to make a difference in an area of our lives that isn't working for us, right? So when we have the power to do that, then what we're teaching our children is that there's always a way out, because it's such an enormously fulfilling and expanding feeling to be able to overcome an obstacle or a challenge. And those are the kinds of experiences we want for ourselves, and those are the kind of experiences we want to create for our children, right?
Right.
Challenges will always be there. Difficulties will always be there. Struggle will always be there. We can't predict or control what happens in our environment, but how we manage it and how we handle it, we can. We have a great deal of control over. And if we don't have the tools or the development or the skills, then we just look outside of ourselves to get them. No different than going to school to become a therapist, you know, to become a mechanic, to become whatever. We go somewhere to get that expertise, right?
Right.
So it's the same thing with our own lives. So when we are showing, when we are not just speaking, you know, talking the talk, when we are walking the talk, and actually mentoring for our children how to go about, you know, getting that power over our lives, or that self-mastery, then they're hungry for it too, because now they're feeling that overwhelming you know, energy that one gets when they break through a challenge, right? It becomes addictive almost, you know. It's what's the word? It's not quite addictive. It's compelling, right? It compels us to want the same things for ourselves.
Right.
Was that enough? Sorry, that was a lot.
That's a good beginning, and it focuses on such a core issue in terms of the impact that the relationship between the parents have on the children.
Yes.
And I mean, one of the reasons I entitled this particular series, "A Passionate Life and Relationship and Dynamite Families," is that that recognition from over 50 years of working in this field, just seeing it over and over, the difference it makes.
Yes.
When the heart is able to stay open most of the time between the mother and the father, or whoever is at the head of the family, and how the children are just, I mean, even as you say, young age, before they can absorb any of it intellectually, they're absorbing it in their bodies.
Yes.
And we know from research now that it shows up in all of the readings in the bodies. And so that the feeling of power or weakness, and simply demonstrating how do you have a positive relationship. Because what's all too often demonstrated is exactly the opposite.
Yes.
And kids say, "I'll never be like that," but what training did they have? They know no other way to be, and their brain is conditioned to it anyway. So it's very, very important. Put your relationship first. That will not put your relationship second, but that'll put them in a prime position to witness what maintaining that love and passion at all the levels of passion can really it can be the greatest thing you can do for your kids. So,
and vulnerability is so important. Right?
Exactly. Even taking that date night out, you know, I've had parents say, "Oh, I can't afford it because, you know, we've got the kids, and you know, and besides, we have this one child or two kids that are having these problems, you know, and relationships, and they're so emotionally sensitive and all of this." And if I can encourage them to take that time, show to your kids how much you care, lo and behold, that problem many times disappears.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that was a tremendous thing to focus right in on that, and I know that that's in the background of your awareness and your work, particularly anytime there are children involved.
Yes.
So we're about coming to the close of our conversation. I'm wondering, is there anything else in particular that you would like to share with the viewing audience before we do stop today?
Yeah, I think that what I would like to say to couples specifically is that if you don't know and if you're not sure, you know, whether it's time to give up or not give up, then that's telling you something. It's telling you that you're not sure. And it's telling you that it's not ended and it's not complete just yet. And so there is still some hope. And that I strongly encourage you, if you haven't already, to get really, really fine help. You know, really good quality help, somebody that you really resonate with, somebody that you respect, somebody that you see as a person who has achieved that kind of mastery, whatever mastery you're looking for, whether it's relationships or otherwise. They have to have it for themselves, and to hire them, you know, to change things around for you, because anything is possible. Really, anything is possible. I've seen it in the 25 years that I've been with people. It's incredible what people are able to achieve, often believing at the very beginning that it's just, you know, not possible.
Yeah, we're
right?
just coming in for a divorce. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. We're, you know, we want you to help us separate, right?
Yeah.
And then they fall madly in love and renew their vows, right? So, I mean, who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Well, great. Now, one other thing I'd love for you to share before we stop is
Sure.
Is your gift. I know you have a generous gift that you're going to share.
Sure. So it is a 30-minute strategy call, and essentially what that means is in 30 minutes we talk laser, but we talk a little bit about you know, what you're up to, what your vision is for your relationship or whatever area you're focusing on, and we look at the blocks, you know, what's in the way, and then we look at a strategy or two, if it's possible, to get you through that block, to start you on your journey to get you through that block. One of the other things that I haven't shared with you, Alan, is I was going to offer another gift, which is part one of my 3-part video series, and I'll send that over to you, and you can add it on here, which is
great.
You know, just how to manage anxiety, because I think that that certainly shows up in relationships quite a bit when we're dealing with vulnerability and intimacy issues. So it's I think it's about a 12 or 15-minute video that people can watch just on anxiety. Okay.
Great, extremely timely, and I know our audience can really use both of those. So
Sure.
I just want to remind our audience that what you're going to see right after this interview, you're going to see a link, and when you see that link, put your first name and your email address and click on that link, and it'll give you access to the wonderful free gifts that Lillian is offering. So remember, just click on that link, and you'll be able to have access to that.
Wonderful.
And so in closing today, Lillian, again, I really appreciate your being a part of this. I appreciated what you offered.
I appreciate the invitation.
Both now and also what I know you're doing in your part of the planet, and doing your part, and it's I appreciate that very much.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
So folks, as we wind up today, I'm Alan Darbonne, and I want to remind you, as I often do, that the planet really needs your particular kind of love and your particular light. We need it to be healed, and we need it to be whole. We can't be whole without you. So tap into your kindness, bring your kindness, and share your truth. That's all we need. Thank you very much. And I will see you in the future. Bye-bye.
Bye, Alan.
Bye-bye.